Ahoy! I am back, more on that in the future, but as you can see, I have been a little bit busy over the past few days. You can see here I've gotten most of the new artifacts, I've unlocked most of the perks on them, with the notable exception of Tempest Fury, because I am absolutely not going to do a sandworm with this equipped in the offhand. That is just not happening. That's ridiculous. AGS fixed this. This is terrible. Anyways, the only thing that I'm missing here is the PvP track artifact, Ironheart, which I'm also not going to get because right now New World doesn't actually have a pure PvP mode that you can play to progress on the PvP track, since Theory 3s basically don't exist anymore. So I'm just not going to do that. I will not play OPR. I will not run faction missions over and over. That's just not happening. So in essence, I've pretty much completed the new season at this point, which in itself is kind of funny and sad. But I wanted to talk about how you can upgrade these different artifacts and what I would recommend for them. We're going to hop down here to the Gypsum Kiln, where conveniently the artifacts that we're looking for are actually listed right at the bottom, all the new ones. So let's start with Nature's Wrath. Now, Nature's Wrath obviously has this high damage component to it, which gives it quite a bit of flexibility. Generally, if you're unsure and you just kind of like wanting to fit this into as many builds as possible, you probably put health on it. But there's a good chance that you might want something more specific depending on what exactly you want to do with it. So any recommendation that I'm doing here would be a bit vague. I think it's mostly going to be in damage focused builds, so you might be looking for a specific damage focused perk instead. Anything that can increase your damage, anything like harnessing, for example. I think they're at the bottom somewhere. I think it's avoid harnessing here, for example. So these kind of things are something you could obviously consider as well, just purely based on what you want to go for. But if you want to have this as a very nice all-rounder, then you would want to have health on it, I think, because it's just the most all-rounder perk that you can get for PvE and PvP. With Creed, I would say similar. It's a relatively niche item in itself. It's a niche piece of armor that maybe we'll see on some muskets and maybe some ranged builds. And in that case, again, if you want to go for the most all-rounder option, you're going for health. But if you don't want to do that, you are going for something like harnessing or anything that can amplify the damage of the specific build that you want to combine it with. So once again, same flexibility, same idea. Gilli's Gravity Gauntlets are a bit unusual in that they already have health and enchanted ward on them. This means that we cannot slot any of the traditional defensive perks on them, but what we can still add is conditioning. So for example, we could still add either a flame conditioning to that, or we could add any of the physical conditionings to that. I'm trying to see if I can actually find the perks in this mess somewhere. You can see that, for example, frost conditioning is here and flame conditioning is here. So a few of them are there. But yeah, obviously, whichever you prefer. Generally, for large scale, I think you probably get more of slash conditioning. If you're going more, here we go, we got slash conditioning here. If you're more against single targets or small scale combat or arenas, again, which don't exist at the moment, then you'd probably go for thrust conditioning instead, if you're looking towards the physical side. But yeah, that's one nice option. Obviously, this is also a very nice place to simply slot an ability perk if you have any specific ones that you're after, that you always want to have in your build. Like if you want to put Insatiable Graph well on this, I think this is a very good place to put that. Though you're probably not going to actually run Gilli's Gravity Gauntlets with a Great Axe, because that's probably going to be a power capped most of the time, even with some weakens. So it's more for niche builds in general. But again, specific perks for that could definitely be found and be useful. Next, we have Phoenix. With Phoenix, I think in most situations you will be running health on this as well. The other kind of health, the amulet health, which is actually a fair bit more, which I think is hard to justify not taking, and especially in combination with the other defensive perks that you have here. I think it's just very strong. But it is worth keeping in mind that at the end of the day, Phoenix is probably not good for tanky builds because of how the passive works, because the whole revive mechanic, which requires you to deal a lot of damage very quickly. So because of that, I think there's some other options that you can also look towards rather than going for health. You can go for specific protection if you say, for example, you know, the threat that I'm facing is this specific type, then I would go for a specific type of protection, of course. But I think health overall will get you more, but you could even get more specialized stuff. You could get, for example, empowered or alacrity or something along those lines. Really just going by whatever you prefer. Interesting enough, you can actually put a refreshing recovery on this as well and just give yourself yet another option of resetting things. But I think that is a bit more of a gamble in comparison. Personally, I will probably still be running health on this just because it allows me to test it in more different builds. Venom is kind of already set in what direction you have to take it in because it is built around heavy attacks and it comes with transient strikes and transient crits already. Now, what I would say here is that, of course, penetrating backstab is up for consideration for some extra damage. And of course, plagued strikes is up for consideration because that is another thing that gets applied with a heavy attack. But another thing that I would most certainly consider or keep in mind here as a potential option is the bleeding sweep from the steel spear charm here. Because it actually does a relatively high amount of damage when slotted on your weapon. It's twice the damage of what it does on your armor. And if you're building an entire build around heavy attacks, which in case of the spear basically means building an entire build around the coup de grace, you might as well put more damage on the coup de grace. I think depending on the situation, you get more damage out of this or this. So I think it's a back and forth. But I feel like because of how this weapon is designed, you're not going to sit on this weapon for very long. I don't think you're going to hold this spear in your hand for very long. You're doing your quick combo, coup de grace, drop the damage from that, and that's all you're doing. And then you're switching to your other weapon, which can also do heavy attacks, because that's how you actually get benefits from the passive. So you utilize it a little bit on the spear and then on another weapon. And in that case, you're not getting that much out of penetrating backstabs. You get a decent amount of plague strikes maybe, and you can have plague crits on your other weapon. And you're definitely getting the damage still out of bleeding sweep here. Even though it is a dot, I am not the biggest fan of building into dots, but in this case, I think there could be value just from the very high additional damage that allows you to then just run your other weapon. So I think that's actually one of the stronger options to consider here. Tempest Fury, well, if you can actually get the fully upgrade, if you can actually get the last part on it, technically, I think the best thing here would be a gem socket, but for some reason it doesn't allow gem sockets. It doesn't have an elemental type, so it doesn't really make sense to me. But even on PTR, it was already the case. You couldn't get a gem socket on there, and you still cannot. So yeah, I think that already cuts into the damage, and it's kind of annoying. I think one consideration here could be thwarting strikes, because you're going to be gritting quite a fair bit. So that is something that you could definitely contemplate. You could consider attunement as well, for example. You could also consider things like Rogue, if that is your playstyle, or like Vicious, if you just want to go for some more AoE damage. It's out there, but really, again, I think the real option is the one that doesn't exist. I'm kind of hoping that maybe they give us the option later to just slot a gem on there, and I really don't see why this wouldn't have a gem. Maybe it is because it has that second passive that you unlock. I'm not sure, but yeah, it's very frustrating, very annoying. Sin comes with Keenly Jagged and Refreshing Move, meaning it doesn't have a damage con perk yet. That means you can, for example, put Rogue on it, you can put Enchanted on it, you can still also put Penetrating Backstab on it, but that is not even a damage con perk. So I think it depends on what you exactly want to do with it. It is kind of a utility-based thing, right? You cannot put Plague Crits on it, I think, because you have Keenly Jagged on there. But you still have some flexibility. You could also put Attunement on it. But for example, if you want to go for a throwing build, I think I would lean towards Enchanted or Vicious. I really don't know where people are going to end up using this. Obviously, a lot of people are collecting this because it's the easiest one to get. But I think the passive allows it to be more effective as kind of a utility offhand, combined with other weapons that benefit more from the extended debuffs, which may also affect which perk you end up putting on it. But yeah, I think to utilize it by itself, you're looking towards one of the normal damage focused perks over here that just increase the damage a little bit more. So those are the perks that I'm thinking make most sense for the new artifacts that we have here. And then of course we also have Ironheart. Now Ironheart gives you Refreshing and Enchanted Ward locked, and it also gives you 20% extra health in a medium loadout. Now, because it already gives you so much extra health, I wouldn't necessarily put more health on it. So instead, I would probably just go for a specific type of conditioning, or if you want to go something like Freedom, Invigorated Vigor, this is your option as well, depending on playstyle, depending on overall build. Very flexible there at the moment, but those are the main options I would be looking at. I think primarily slash conditioning or thrust conditioning here once again. But yeah, once again, also with a lot of flexibility, depending on the exact playstyle, exact build, what you are after. You can also still go health on it. It's not like it's illegal. It just feels like it's overkill invested into one thing when you probably get more out of going into other things at that point. But you also already have Enchanted Ward on it, so you're kind of restricted in what you can get. I hope this was a helpful overview of the artifacts that we have for now. We will talk more about how to unlock at least Phoenix. Tomorrow we'll talk about a very quick way to grind the Season Pass, the artifact, to track 80. I've done that over the past few days very, very quickly. And we'll also talk a little bit more about other things that are in the new season. For now, thank you very much for watching, and thanks to my patrons for supporting this channel, especially over the past month while I was absent. Thanks for watching. SLOTH out.